This and all the free content of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Become a patron today and help support the show while getting exclusive content made just for you. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. And we thank you in advance.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And right off the top, I want to apologize to you in advance if my voice is a little rough up sounding. I had the Rona last week, and now my allergies are joining the party. And so forgive me. I know it's hard to listen to people who are affected in such a way. But you know what? We've got to do shows for you folks. You have such a voracious appetite for these shows that I must work while deathly ill. So I hope you feel comfortable with that when you read my obituary. All right. So today we are talking with Jeffrey Harding. He is a licensed battlefield guide here at Gettysburg, but he just recently released a book called Gettysburg's Lost Love Story, the ill-fated romance of General John Reynolds and Kate Hewitt. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. It's my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. And thanks to your assistant, Eric, too, for making all this come together. And I'd just like to shout out to my publisher, Acadia Press, History Press, for the opportunity to bring this book to bear, and looking forward to chatting about it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Now, this is a story that everybody knows a tiny little sliver of, but they don't know the whole story that you go into in the book, which is very interesting. I thought there was nothing to be known about Kate. Is that the way it was until you found it, or what's the story with Kate?
And the whole deal come together. First, let me tell you, I got you back on the whole voice thing, although mine was not quite up to par with yours on your good days, certainly. But
well, thank you.
In my other life, I worked as a disc jockey, so
oh, really?
I'm missing the drop-down microphone with the,
That's exactly what I have.
On it and everything.
That's exactly what I have right in front of me.
Oh man, yeah. I'll tell you an interesting story about that some other time. But
okay.
Anyway. Yeah, so, Matt, I was trying to work on COVID hit. I said, well, I'm going to take this time and try to get back to working on this book I've been looking at for years in terms of getting it done. And it was Navy connections to the battle. I worked for the Navy for over 33 years. So whenever I would stumble on some kind of Navy connection to the battle, I was like, all right, I got to write this down. Someday I'm going to put all this together. And I did write an article for Naval History Magazine last year, just a few samples of some of the research I've done. But anyway, I was working on John Reynolds and a chapter on John Reynolds and his brother, William Reynolds. William Reynolds was a admiral in the Navy during the Civil War, but more significantly, early in his career, he's on a worldwide voyage that's quite historic called XX. Phil Brick writes a book about this. It's very controversial. Charles Wilkes is in command of the thing. Anyway, it's a heck of a story. But he was probably the better known Reynolds, certainly up until the time John was killed at Gettysburg. It all changed after that. But in writing the chapter on these guys, I said, well, let me do a little sidebar on this whole Kate Hewitt thing. And, I knew the basics of the story. I always talked about it. Stopped #1 on the tour. And I mentioned this in the book. It gives you a chance to humanize the cost of the battle. You throw all these numbers at people, and it's kind of mind-numbing. So you tell a human interest story right off the bat, and there's no better one. Secretly engaged to this girl, Kate Hewitt, no one knew, etc. So
now,
anyway,
now just for the sake of members of the audience who aren't familiar with the story that you tell on tours, give us that story. What is the story that people commonly hear on a tour about Kate and John?
Okay, so you're out on the first day's field, and Reynolds is killed, right away when he brings the infantry onto the field, and it's tragedy in and of itself. Certainly, the highest ranking officer killed during the battle, as it turns out, for the Union Army, and so they examine his remains shortly thereafter, and his West Point ring is missing, and he's got this gold ring on his pinky finger, and inside there's an inscription that says, "Dear Kate." So everybody at this point is kind of scratching their head. Where's the West Point ring, class ring, and who in the world is Kate? And from that point on, people are trying to figure this out. The remains go to the family, and they're pretty quickly. 2 a.m, July 3rd, over in Philadelphia, they bring his remains into his sister's home, 1829 Spruce Street, right off Rittenhouse Square. If you live anywhere near Philly, you might go down and check it out. But anyway, now the family's perplexed. They know as much as I just described to you. And sure enough, there's a knock on the door later that day, and this young lady introduces herself as Kate Hewitt and proceeds to tell the family that she was secretly engaged to their fallen brother. And they had planned to introduce her to the family, hopefully around July 8th, but that wasn't to be, with him being killed at Gettysburg. And so that's the story we knew. We knew that Kate also had a secret promise, and Dale Gallen did a beautiful work of art a number of years ago called Last Promise, and there was a lot of research done on this at the time that basically unveiled the fact that she had promised John if he were to be killed during the war, she would enter a religious life. And she begins this process not too long afterward at the Daughters of Charity in Emmitsburg. But a few years later, she mysteriously disappeared. And from that point on, no one knew what happened to her. Now, a book was published in 2005 that seemed to indicate she might have been this particular woman named Catherine Hewitt from Stillwater, New York. And so there was some belief it could have been her, but it wasn't certain. So that's where it was left. And that's the story everyone would typically get on the tour. You've got this fiance left behind, hoping to marry it at end of the war, at least meet the family finally. And maybe they didn't tell the family about her because she's Catholic and he's Presbyterian. That had always been the supposition. But beyond that,
right,
that's all we knew.
Yeah.
But Matt, the more I looked and the more I dug into this, I'm finding a lot of gaping holes in the story in one way, shape, form, or another. I'm finding conflicting information, misinformation, the way things are described. For example, you'll hear people say, well, she became a nun, or she tried to become a nun. Or actually, with the Daughters of Charity, they don't call them nuns. They call them sisters. And so I start making a list of all these little nuances, if you will, to the story and trying to fill some holes. And that's how, I got started on this whole thing, trying to get it straight, to put a sidebar in another book, which became a book all its own.
Yeah, so you go into their lives before they meet, it looks like here. Where was she born?
Yeah, and there's one of the mysteries right out of the box. Is if you were to go online and look or read different sources, you'll read that she was from Oswego, New York.
Owego?
And then you'll read, and then you'll read she's from Owego.
Oh, okay.
So, like, which one was it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm scratching my head on this and did enough research to determine unequivocally that she is indeed from Owego, New York. And some of the documentation that she provided information for at the Daughters of Charity, and also when she was at the Sacred Heart Academy, Eden Hall in Torresdale, Pennsylvania, North Philly, basically, when she comes back from the West Coast. And we'll get to that later. But anyway, she provides personal information both times, and some of that looks like it could have been misread to get Oswego, and that's perhaps where some people got that. But the key to it, Matt, is she's an orphan. She's an orphan. She's born April 1st, 1836, Owego, New York. And in the letters that John Reynolds' sisters write to his brother William about what they're going through when the remains are brought to the home in Philadelphia, and Kate Hewitt comes to introduce herself, they write about this to his sisters. And these things are treasure troves of information. But they mention Kate, of course, in there and give some details on their relationship. But they also mention Kate had a brother. And that's it. Apparently they were estranged. Again, religious differences. He was apparently Baptist and she was Catholic and whatever. But no one ever really knew anything about her having a brother or what's the deal on the brother. And so working with my research associate, who I always like to give a shout out to because none of this was possible without Mary Pitkin, Mary Stanford Pitkin. If you want to know more about her, just go online, throw her name in. She's got a heck of a website for doing genealogy work. Mm-hmm. And I had worked with Mary on some other things I have done at Gettysburg and researching what have you. She had an ancestor in the battle. But anyway, we dug up some information that just blew us away. We found her brother. Her brother's named Benjamin. He was an assistant postmaster in Owego. She left property to Benjamin, and he actually went from Owego all the way to Albany when they held her funeral in Albany years later. And we have the article from a local paper in Owego saying, Benjamin Hewitt just returned from the funeral for his sister, et cetera. So we were able to lock that up. Yeah.
Where do you begin when you start to research this stuff? Where do you start? Like, where did this start? What was the first thing that you looked for or found by accident that started the ball rolling?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so it's funny because I always had an interest in ships. I mentioned my work with the Navy and what have you. So I was very curious about what ship did he get on and she get on, because allegedly they had met on a ship coming from California, 1860. So I started researching that online and thought I had found something actually about the ship that they rode from Panama up to New York. Now, some of that had been in one of the prior publications that I mentioned previously. And I found the name of that ship, found a crew list, but I'm digging for this one from San Francisco down to Panama. And sure enough, found it. And that turned out to be a gold mine in and of itself. We'll talk a little more later about that, I'm sure. But a ship called the Golden Age. And there they were, and found a crew list, and both of them on there. And I mean, Matt, you're researching these things. Like, where do you start, right? Well, once you find something like that, and I know you had a fever, right, with what you just went through.
Oh yeah,
it's a different. Well, like the old Saturday Night Live skit, right? I got a fever. There's only one cure. Once I got in that much, and I actually hooked Mary, because Mary was a little skeptical at first. This story doesn't sound like hold. There's a lot of mistaking. So when we found that, she was in, and she was all in, and we were off and running. And I mean, to get a chance, and I think we both felt really blessed, Matt. I mean, this story's been around. Edward Nichols introduced it in his landmark biography on Reynolds years ago, the 50s. And then another woman started to publicize it about it, Mary Maloney. She was a student at St. Joseph's there in Emmitsburg, and she wrote about it. And then Wayne Motts and Mike Riley get into it when they're working for Dale Gallen. And then there's another young lady who's done remarkable work on Reynolds, Paulina Ingram Heinz. And then Marion Latimer wrote her book in 2005. So I think a lot of this stands on those folks' shoulders. Mm-hmm. But to finally be able to resolve the ultimate mystery of what happened to her, because there was that empty space. We could never tell our visitors, the rest of the story.
Right.
Paul Harvey's
like Paul Harvey, yeah.
Yeah. And we finally got it. And I mean, we were just tickled. And then, of course, we kept digging and seeing what else we could find. And one thing led to another. Found out just kind of a shocker out of Kate's time in California, because she goes out there to be a governess for a well-to-do family. And there was again, that's another one where there was mix-ups on who did she work for out there. The name that was given by Mary Maloney in the 1960s, you can't find that guy in California. But actually, there was a very similarly named individual, and we pretty much nailed it as far as being that guy. And there was another book out, The Two Catherines, where a gentleman had written that book, had speculated on that individual as well. And so there was good information. We were finally able to piece that together. But, in retrospect, just Kate, just a phenomenal story of a woman on her own in 19th century America. Perseverance and triumph over adversity is what I like to say about it. Just something else.
Sure. I mean, now, so we talked about this before we started the show, because I wanted to clarify, because, in case the folks at home don't understand how this works yet. when I have an author on, I don't have the time to read the whole book. So I say to the author, give me a couple of chapters. We'll talk about those, and then people will have to get the book for the rest of the story. And in one of the chapters that you suggested, there's an allusion to what I only assume was covered in an earlier chapter that I hadn't read about her being, about her doing what she had to do, as they like to say, back in the old days, right? She did what she had to do in order to get by. And for those of you who don't get the euphemism, she was a prostitute. Is this a theory, or is this an actual bona fide fact?
No, we have documentation on it. We have her census records when she's living in Sacramento. She's, from everything we found, the story of her going to San Francisco looks true. Mm-hmm. And she likely was a governess there for a while. We don't know what transpired to put her out on her own, but the circumstances were that she had to survive. And actually, she wasn't alone in that regard. You're talking about that area of the country on the heels of the gold rush. Right. And that's big business out there, and there's a lot of money to be made in it. And there's not that much other opportunity for women on their own. And I'll tell you that there's a letter that she writes to a newspaper out there. Back then they called it a card, a personal card. She wrote in response to something that had been written about her that was pretty unforgiving. And boy, she set them straight. And I'll tell you what, the letter speaks volumes. Volumes as far as her character, but also her education and what have you. So even though she was an orphan, there were some good schools in the Owego area. She picked up a great education somewhere, and it shows.
So she was a bright girl. She was just a victim of circumstance, really. And, like she actually had a head on her shoulders.
Absolutely. And the family comments on that, and the letters they write to the brother. Yep.
Yeah. So
not on the prostitution. They didn't know that.
No.
They talk about her writing ability. Yeah. So they have a couple letters at the time, and good Lord, if we could find these letters, but letters exchanged between John and Kate that were found in John's belongings, and they made a comment about her writing as far as her education. Yeah.
So do you think, or did you find any evidence to suggest that John might have known about her prior occupation before meeting her on the boat?
Yeah, so no. And we have no way of knowing unless I think we were to find some more letters, which I have not given up hope. I'm still working with various descendants who have had things that belong to John to see what we can try to turn up. But we don't know. You can only little conjecture there, try to piece together the puzzle in your mind. But, I hate to speculate too much. Would only say that, John's a pretty smart guy. And when you meet somebody, you probably get a kind of a feel. It depends. Sometimes you can be fooled. I don't have anything to indicate she was trying to pull the wool over his eyes. But I would think that John certainly can tell that this is not a naive young lady. This is somebody who's been in the world, been on her own, and has some savvy. Now, whether he knows any more than that, I don't know. And I guess it adds another dimension, Matt, to, they kept it a secret, the engagement in the family. Yeah. And was it the religious differences or was it more? And hopefully someday we find out.
Yeah.
Like I said, I haven't given up.
It's an interesting twist to the whole story. I wonder, I know in polite society it was probably looked down upon to, marry a prostitute. But you remember they mentioned it in Tombstone, but I think it's true that the Earp brothers had married prostitutes. And I wonder if that was a little more common than we think. And I wonder if the men who would marry them were either, I don't want to say lowlifes, but you know what I mean? At the time would have been considered lowlifes. Although then, you got the Earps, they were lawmen. So what were lawmen considered back in those days? Were they lowlifes or were they not lowlife? Like, I don't know what society looked at him as back then. And then, a military man like John Reynolds, what was their stature? Because I don't know, but I'm guessing maybe, they kind of were somewhat in the same boat, but not maybe on different decks, if you will.
Yeah.
And so maybe it wasn't so abnormal, and maybe John was thinking, like you said, I think you said it before we started actually recording, but maybe he was waiting until they met her and saw her for her and fell in love with her like he did, instead of worrying about, I met a girl, by the way, she used to be a prostitute, actually meet her. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and you're never going to write a letter home like that, because they're going to hate her before they ever meet her, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you want them to fall in love with her, exactly. And that was always my supposition, if it was just the religious differences, even with that, because, there's a belief that she's of Irish descent. And so you're Catholic, you're Irish back then, there's a lot of prejudice. And in fact, in the letter, I think the quote was, she made no parade of her religion. One of the sisters said that, so there is that thought process going on between people at the time. So I'm sure that even if it was just that, he's not going to write a letter. He's going to introduce her in person, because he knows they're going to care for her in a special way. Right. And they did. Yeah. And they did when they met her. So there's the proof in the pudding.
Let's jump ahead to that then, because everybody will want to, if they want to fill in the blanks between meeting her on the boat and John's death, then they're going to have to get the book. But let's skip ahead to his death. He dies. How does she find out about it?
Yeah, so we believe she's still in the Philadelphia area once she completed her conversion to Catholicism at Eden Hall Sacred Heart Academy. And we believe, as much as anything, one of the reasons you can prove that is she shows up at the family home on July 3rd to grieve over the remains, introduce herself, and it's in the newspaper. Like the next day, and this is in the book. What I love is that we were able to find more than one. So I got an image in the book of what the headline looked like in the newspaper the day after Reynolds was killed at Gettysburg, and then I have a quote from another newspaper. So she's going to see this, and July 2nd. So she's gonna go over and meet the family. So that's how she found out about it, as far as we know. I don't have anything saying I found out from seeing the newspaper, but how else is she going to find out? She sees a newspaper. She goes to see the family. She's in Philadelphia. How else could she get there that quickly?
Yeah,
it's like a process of elimination. So
okay,
yeah.
So she gets there. This is the family. So his body arrives. What'd you say, on the 3rd?
Yes, 2 a.m.
2 a.m. on the 3rd. And when did they have the burial for him?
Yeah, that's on the 4th. So.
On the 4th. And
she's pretty quick.
And she's there while the body is in the house.
Yes.
So
she does not go to the funeral, but she's there to spend time with the family, speaking to one another. I got a quote in a book where they quote, the family's commenting on how devastated she is. Yeah. And
she's leaning on the casket, saying, "How do I let you go?" and stuff like that. And she's really heartbroken. Yeah. Now, so she
was like crushing the life out of her. I was trying to.
Yeah. That'll do it. I'm imagining if I was an orphan. And at some point in my life, I found myself a prostitute. And then here I meet this handsome officer in the Army, just by chance. And we start a little love affair, and we're talking about marriage. I'm finally thinking, thank God, I can breathe easy. I have a family in the future, stability, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sure she loved him too. It seems pretty obvious from the quotes that you have there from the sister's letters that she did love him. So it wasn't just that, but of course you've got to think about that stuff too. And so it must have been a huge, huge crushing disappointment for her on many levels.
Well, Matt, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, this perseverance quality of hers. This is not the first time she's been knocked to the canvas, Mm-hmm. She's an orphan from the get-go. She goes to California, and she's going to work for this well-to-do family, and something happens. We don't know what. But now she's out on her own, has to go to the world's oldest profession to make ends meet and take care of. She has an adopted sister out there. She's so-called sister that she's taking care of. So she's doing what she needs to do. And she, like you said, she meets this dashing, handsome, soldier, and he's always kind of pined for someone, but never found the right girl. And circumstances prevented opportunity in many cases with his career. But here she is, and
Sounds like
stars
me.
align. Well, be careful what ship you get on there. The love boat, right?
No, I'm going to be careful what battles I get into. Forget
well,
the
that
ship.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So she goes and spends time with the family. There's isn't there an exchange of rings or some kind of jewelry? Because aren't they wondering where his West Point ring is?
Absolutely.
And where is it?
Absolutely. And so he had given that to her as a sign of his commitment to her. She had given him this ring that said, "Dear Kate." And there lies another mystery. And one thing I'm very proud of and very grateful to descendants of John Reynolds and to Dale Gallen, because if you get the book, you're going to see with everybody else the first time anyone's seen a semblance of what his ring looked like. At West Point at the time, class rings were individual. Wow. By that I mean you didn't all have the same ring.
So it wasn't Jostins or Jostins or whatever that made your ring like they do in high school and everything else?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. What was mine? Herf something or Herf Jones?
Herf Jones,
Shout out to Herf Jones. Yeah. Everybody Herf Jones, buy the book. Oh my gosh. But
so the ring, is that the picture of the rings that you have on the back?
And actually, that's a little sketch that Dale did for me for a painting. I have the last promise, and for what they call that when they stick a little one down in the corner. And he was kind enough to let me use that on the book. But no, inside the book, there's a drawn artist impression of the ring.
Okay,
and it's beautiful. Dale did a wonderful job on it, and just tickled me to be able to have that, because you talk about how's it start. That was another thing. I don't know, Matt, I just got a burning curiosity on things in my life. I just got to find them, so I'm like, all right, where's the ring? And, what should he was on, et cetera. And it kind of morphed into all this. But
I think I found
absolutely.
it. It's, if anybody's listening and they got the book in front of them, it's on page 96. Now, what is that inscription? It's two hands shaking, like somebody shaking hands, and it says, "Dinna forget."
Yeah, dinna forget.
What does that mean?
Right, never forget. Never forget. So you got the bond of all those guys that went through it together, right?
That's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
so cool.
So Kate gives the family that ring back.
Gives that ring back.
Where are those rings today?
Yeah. So. Where are the rings today? So one is with the family.
Okay.
The West Point ring. The Dear Kate ring, I like to refer to it as, is missing in action. And a close reading of the letters from the sisters, two of his sisters, Jenny and Ellie, write to brother William about this whole thing. And if you read those, you see that the family kept that ring. So that ring could still be with some branch of the family. It could be lost to history. Who knows? And that's driving me crazy. So where is that ring? Absolutely driving me crazy. And I'll tell you another funny thing. But before I forget this, some folks have called that a Cladog ring, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, Matt, but there's an Irish ring with crossed hands.
Oh, yeah.
Much like the Reynolds ring has a handshake.
Yep.
And so there was a belief that the gold ring might have been that, but I could find no documentation to indicate that. So those kind of little things, that bother me. I gotta say it. So it's in the endnote somewhere talking about, okay, well, it could have been a Cladog, but there is no, that I could find, no proof of that. And on folks that mentioned it, there were no endnotes saying we know that because of blah, 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 So I think one thing that hopefully the book does is, if you will, sets the record straight on this kind of thing. Now, the other thing that's important, and I forgot to mention this earlier, when they find his remains, there's a silken cord around his neck, and there's a heart and a cross on it. And one of his aides writes about this, William Riddle, and gives a great description. And that gets a little convoluted over the years, the old telephone story where you tell somebody and it goes around the circle, and by the time it gets back, it's something else. But anyway, it's a cross and a heart. And we believe, if you read the letters again from the family to the brother, that Kate kept those. They were things that she could have kept as someone getting ready to enter into a religious life with the Daughters of Charity, where she said the ring had no use for her anymore. The West Point ring, no, we're giving that back to the family. But this heart and cross, she can keep that. And that was on Reynolds when he was killed. That was found on him. So the 2 rings, the 1 ring's missing. The deer cage ring's on a small finger, and the heart and cross around his neck. And anyway, yeah. So where's that? And that's driving me crazy too. And I tell you, one thing that saved us early on was one of the descendants of the man that Kate Hewitt will later marry after her time in Albany, Joseph Fort, is a lady named Liz Warner. And Liz had a genealogy posted that Mary Pitkin found that actually mentioned this woman, Catherine Fort, who had once been with the Daughters of Charity in Albany, and it would just jumped out like a siren, to Mary when she's looking, because she's looking for this kind of thing. But they had, Liz had the family Bible with so much, just information in it, and right there was about the marriage, which we'll get into in a little while. But I asked Liz, I said, Liz, anybody in the family running around with a silk cord or a very old cross, where is this stuff? And you know what? My guess is only a guess, but my guess is that she might have had those on when she was buried. I think that might have been something she kept, and they went to the grave with her.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so after Reynolds is buried, what does she do?
All right. So Kate's made the commitment to enter into a religious life, and she stays true to that. Now, again, with the misinformation or the misinterpretation, there's a letter written to the Daughters of Charity by a representative, and we dug this thing out. It's incredible how this stuff's out there, and when you find it, you just can't believe it. But it always been this story, Matt, that she began the process to become a sister with the Daughters of Charity 8 days after he was buried. Well, sure enough, 8 days after he was buried, someone from Eden Hall, Sacred Heart, wrote a letter to the Daughters of Charity about Kate Hewitt and inquiring on whether or not she could begin that process with them. So that letter was written 8 days after he was buried. She did not show up on their doorstep 8 days later. That comes later. With the Daughters of Charity, you have to do what they call postulancy period of work. And she's actually in Baltimore doing that. I think it was called Mount Hope. And it's really not until the following spring, March 17th, 1864, where she formally begins the process to become a full-fledged sister with the Daughters of Charity, which is going to take a while. That's a process. You don't go into to having your vows right away. You're what they call a seminary sister at some point. See the habit, and ultimately there'll be vows, but that doesn't come to fruition for Kate.
Yeah,
she does begin the process in earnest, and she's in Emmitsburg for a couple of years, and then to Albany.
Do we know, while she's in Emmitsburg, does she ever make pilgrimages up to the battlefield to see where her beloved John fell?
Yeah, that's great, Matt, because you're reading my mind here. I could have fed you that question, and you could have turned it out there at a better time. Yeah, what's really cool, and I just want to say that I'm really proud and I'm thankful to History Press. I think there are 86 images in this book, and so many of them are rare images.
Yeah, and
some of them have never been published, like the one on the cover of Kate. That came from the family. No one had ever seen that picture.
Oh, really?
You talk about knocking my socks off. And that came late in the game. I had all my pictures turned in, and all of a sudden that came to me, and I was like, holy smoke, you've got to be kidding. Yeah, there's only ever been 2 known pictures of Kate Hewitt. And so I worked with Ron Coddington over at Military Images. They were very, very kind to me. also an assistant of his, Elizabeth Topping, who's an expert at garments, what people would have been wearing. The two pictures of Kate Hewitt are around. One of them, she looks really young. One of them, she looks fairly old. And I was never certain they were even the same person. And Ron's got this great database system where they can run pictures and compare and see if they pop out as matches, facial rec stuff.
Yes.
So I turned to him, and he was very gracious, worked with me, and yes, they are the same woman. And beyond that, they were able to work with me. And the captions in my book, aside from the pictures, I mean, they're pretty ambitious captions because I wanted people to know this stuff. And I mean, they basically pinpointed when these photos would have been taken, which is not the information that's on the back of the photo. And that was one of the problems. Previously, people would look at that and go, oh, this was taken in Philadelphia, 1860, whatever. Well, no, it might have been copied at a studio in Philadelphia at that time. But this picture was probably taken years earlier at a different studio.
How do you know?
So
how do you know that? How do you know that?
Yeah, how do you know that? So I bow to their graces because, in the first place, they couldn't have been taken. She just looks too different. So, it's obvious, and I don't know why anyone else really hadn't drilled down on this, but to me, they're just different. And that was my bone of contention. But they got into looking at the clothing. Here's clothing that, let me give you an example. That picture on the cover, that headwear that she's wearing is truly distinct and was extremely popular about the time she boarded the ship and met John Reynolds. So that picture fit perfectly. Yeah.
Yes. All right.
It's really, really amazing stuff. So that's a segue going back to your perfectly timed question. Did she? Here's what we know. Before she began the formal process with the Daughters of Charity, she visited the battlefield with the Reynolds family. And here's the cool part. There are pictures of her on the battlefield with the family. And these pictures, it's just crazy. One of the family members, descendants, who was very much into the history of the family, donated a lot of stuff to Franklin and Marshall. That's the number one archives place in the world for all things Reynolds. And Christopher Robb up there is just an amazing librarian, archivist. The book wouldn't have happened without him either. But anyway, so she did an etching of the family on the battlefield over around, the area of the battlefield by Devil's Den called the Slaughter Pen, right?
Yep.
So the family has this image of the Reynolds family. The descendants have this image of the Reynolds family, and this lady creates an etching from it. And in it is family members, and sisters, brothers, and this woman. And I think for years everybody thought it was all Reynolds family. Well, I think for years everybody thought it was just people. And it is people, but who?
Yeah.
It turns out it's the Reynolds family, and beyond that, Matt, there's another picture taken, it looks like the same day, of this group over by the Devil's Den. And the family original photo of this has the names down of everybody in the image. And Kate Hewitt's name's on it.
Wow.
I get chills thinking about it. It's like crazy. This is the first time we got Kate Hewitt on the battlefield.
Yeah. Well, so now you've read my mind because right when you brought this up, or right before you brought this up, I opened to page 133 with the etching and the picture that you're talking about, and I was gonna ask you about this, but you beat me to the punch. So this picture though is from November of 1863. So this isn't 25 years later when all the veterans are coming back. His family and Kate came back as early as November of 1863.
Absolutely. And here's
that's
the rub.
Cool.
They're trying to find out where he was killed.
Yeah.
And as you know, they're in the wrong spot. Right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. And there had been supposition that Reynolds' aide, Charles Vale, his orderly, had shown the family in November of 63 where he was killed. Well, of course, that's not the spot, and that's not the trip that the family made with Charles Vale. And I was able to go into these letters from the family, go into documentation from the Army of the Potomac, and triangulate this thing, Matt. And Charles Vale does take family members to the battlefield, to Herbst Woods, to the tree that's marked, that he marked with an R, to show them where Reynolds was killed. But this is in the spring. This is like late March, early April. This is after Catherine Hewitt has begun the formal process. She is not allowed to go with them, apparently, because what they do is they go visit her in Emmitsburg as part of the same trip to the battlefield.
Okay.
And that unfolds another story, which is a big piece of Catherine Hewitt, Catherine Fort, her life. While they're there, Catherine Hewitt, gives Charles Vail, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of this, it's in the book. This is another rare photo that Fred Vail, Senator Charles Vail, had for many, many years. He opens a museum out in Arizona, and dang if that thing's out in the museum out there. He gave all his good stuff to them. There's a picture of Charles Vail, which is the first one I'd ever seen of him at the age that he would have looked like when he's with Reynolds, when Reynolds was killed. Mm-hmm. He's young. Most of Charles Vail pictures shows him as an old man. And then there's a picture of his handkerchief. And the handkerchief is one she had been creating for John, and it is the most amazingly embroidered handkerchief you'll ever see in your life. Absolutely stunning. And he comments on it. Vail talks about it.
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you, I might as well just mute my microphone and let you interview yourself, because you're beating me to all my questions. Because I was going to get to the handkerchief next and Vail, but going back to first of all, this picture of them in November of 1863 is very interesting to me, because as far as I'm aware, and I'm no expert on photography, so I could be very wrong on this, but this is the earliest picture of the Devil's Den, at least, that I've seen. Is to your knowledge, is this the earliest one, or what is the earliest one that we know about?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that either. I'd have to bow to the graces of the folks that are experts on that, but it's got to be one of the earliest, right? Except for pictures of dead, because there's pictures of dead at the slaughter pen,
sure,
shortly after the battle. But as far as groups visiting the battlefield and everything and what have you.
Well, not just groups, but it's like the shot of the dead, like say for the sharpshooter, for example, that's not of the whole area. That's pretty tight on just where the body is.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
so this is like, I can see, and I think I know where these boulders are. Is this where like the staircase is that goes up that they're working on now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Isn't
you
it?
You can stand where Casey would stood.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So like, there's barely any saplings around this area at that point.
Oh, right. Exactly.
And I think I see the top of the witness tree right on the bend. So I think they got that right.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating to me. What's that?
Yeah. I said you have a good eye picking that out. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now now that we're talking about trees, see how I did that? We're going to go we're going to go to the picture of the Reynolds tree with the R in it. Mm-hmm. Now that tree, I'm assuming, is long gone. But is that tree anywhere near the Reynolds marker today? How much of, when they placed that marker, how sure were they of where the spot should be?
Yeah, so this is, I tell you, and again, there are people that are experts at this that I always bow the graces. First of all, thanks Sue Boardman. Yeah. She gave me that picture to use.
Oh, nice.
She was just so amazingly kind in that regard. A couple images in the book, thanks to her. But that one's just an amazing shot. And that is, because of Charles Vail, going back to say where it happened. As far as where the monument's placed and how close it is to that, it's in the same general area. Mm-hmm. Probably give or take, I would say 20, 30 yards. If you put a spot out there and drew a string around it and went out there, you're going to touch these things. But I don't think anybody can stand on the exact spot. And there's have you been over, what's the name of the Rupp House? They got a display in there.
The Children's Museum?
The Reynolds tree. Yeah. If you go in there, there's a piece of the trunk or the stump of the tree, so it looked a little bigger in my mind than that tree is. So I still have to do a little homework to know for certain how all that comes out in the wash. But certainly feel good about the fact that Vale knows where this had happened. This is not something he's going to forget. And he goes back pretty soon afterwards to start documenting this and writes to the family about it, so.
Well, what's interesting to me about the photo here on page 124 is I'm assuming that's taken looking north. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. Let's see here.
Because you can't make out any of the farm buildings, but it looks like the McPherson land is just in the distance there.
It does. It looks almost northwest to me, Matt.
Yes.
But I wouldn't know for sure, but it does look like that.
Yeah.
I want to say that, yeah.
So I'm going to guess that the tree is not where the monument is today. That's my guess.
No. Absolutely not on the spot. No.
Yeah. But that's the thing that I think we try to reinforce on this show is that just because a monument is there, that's not literally the exact spot. I heard a story once, and I won't name names except for the one name that I'm going to name. But when the movie was being done, Sam Elliott wanted a tour, a Buford-related tour. Do you know the story?
You going to the Bud Hall thing?
I think so. I'm not sure, but it's basically he went down to Brandy Station and everything, and he kept asking the person who was taking him around,
and that's Bud Hall.
Okay, all right. Where was Buford? And he goes, well, he was all over. He was riding his horse all over the place. And then, so then this happened and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, that's great. Where was Buford? And then, it was everywhere because he's running around just making sure everything, but his headquarters were generally in this area. He goes, And then, more story. And he goes, where was Buford during all of this? And then finally the guy just goes, he was right there. And he points to a spot in the ground and Sam Elliott goes and stands on it. And he says something. I don't remember what he said. Do you remember what he said?
Yeah, I think the words were, hot damn.
That's right. Hot damn. And people, even big movie stars like Sam Elliott, people want to know the exact spot. And I always find that funny because now when I was a kid, I used to think that way too, right? But as I got older, I realized we're lucky that we have a general vicinity for a lot of these events, all right? I mean, you think about it, because these guys are going back and marking these things much later, for the most part. How do you expect them to remember? I can't remember what I had for breakfast 2 days ago.
Yes, yeah, that's right. The older they get, the less apt they're going to be accurate on it.
Of course.
I'll tell you a funny story. So it relates. I had the pleasure of being one of the zillion extras in the movie, right? Which, by the way, let's see, this is the 30th anniversary of the filming, because they filmed it in summer and fall of 92.
92, that's right.
The movie Gettysburg.
Yep.
And so I got a chance to get over to where they filmed most of the Little Round Top fighting scenes. And you know where that was, Matt?
Where they that was out at the farm.
On the spot.
Yeah, well, it was out on Pumping Station Road, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Pumping Station and over, if you're heading out on Pumping Station away from the battlefield, on the left, there's that area where they had the angle created and Meade's headquarters and all that. But if you were to turn right on the little side road out there that dumps you out right in front of the lodges at Gettysburg.
Yeah, Camp Gettysburg Road.
Yeah, Camp Gettysburg Road. So that hill right across the street from the lodges, here goes. Now everybody's stomping around in the woods. But I don't know, I've told the story a few times. But I think I could go, here I am channeling a Civil War veteran, I think I could go on that hill and show you exactly where they were filming the scene that I made it into the movie.
Right.
And you can see it too if you go on your DVD and click on, actually, this is a hilarious part. And we all us guides that got a chance to do it right. This is our claim to fame, other than being guides, which should be much more important. But anyway, scene 33, the thumbnail from scene 33, I'm in the thumbnail. They took the shot that I'm in the movie. And the only problem is I'm ramrodding like crazy, but I never get a shot off in the movie. So I'm no good whatsoever to anybody. But every time they cut away, they come back, I'm ramrodding. Right next to Kill Ring.
You could point yourself, okay, so you're right next to Buster.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to look for you next.
Yeah. Let me tell you something I forgot. So if you go to Gettysburg Magazine, issue number 31, Kalina Ingram Heights has a great article in here about all the monuments, markers, and memorials. There are nuances, right? The differences between them all.
That's right.
To Reynolds. And so she's got a pretty good write-up in here about the marker that shows, in theory, where he fell. And she talks about it and what went on behind the scenes to get the thing and where it's located and all that. So if somebody wants to drill down on that, I'm sure she's got it covered. She does great work.
Yeah, that is interesting stuff with monuments and things. Because, I was talking to somebody the other day when we were out on the first day, and he was trying to, make sense of, why would they have their battle line on what's now Reynolds Avenue and not a little further to the west, so as to not give the Confederates the crest of the hill. And I said, well, because this is the land that was available for them to put the monuments on. Like, that doesn't mean they weren't on, the military crest or whatever, the military summit, it's just this is where they were able to put the monuments. And, and that I have to keep reminding myself of, him asking that question reminded me that that's the reason. And that I can't look at these monuments as, no pun intended, everything being set in stone that's written on them, because they're not necessarily in the place that they're talking about. And some monuments will say, 800 yards to the west of this monument is where we held but not everyone does that. So it's
exactly. That's important. And how about with the artillery? The park or the War Department tablets that talk about artillery being in a certain place when it actually is, much further out in the battlefield.
Right. Right.
We talk about the artillery Confederate line for the streets assault.
Yeah, that whole line is misleading with the artillery out there, because it wasn't there safely in the woods. It was out there. You can't, some of those positions, especially south of Longstreet Tower, and it looks like the guns are firing right into the hill in front of them, 10 yards in front of them, because, but they wouldn't have been there. They would have been further out.
Exactly.
All right. So let's get back to Kate and John. So Kate, you mentioned that she goes to become a sister, but it never pans out, right?
Yeah, it never pans out.
Why?
So she's making pretty good progress, excuse me. She gets moved from Emmitsburg up to Albany, New York, and she's going to teach there as part of her duties and her mission, so to speak. Somewhere along the line, but she's getting pretty close at 5 years, where she can make vows, as they would call that, with the Daughters of Charity. And it's not final vows. Some Catholic groups, for lack of a better term, and that's another nuance, Matt, I never knew this, but the Daughters of Charity is not a religious order, it's a community, and there's a difference. And anyway, so in that community, you don't make final vows, you make vows, and then you renew those vows, I believe annually, if memory serves me correct.
Okay.
But anyway, she's about to make vows for the first time when she is, in essence, invited to leave the community due to issues apparently with her temper. And they think that she might be able to find her happiness somewhere else. And she's encouraged to leave. And there's an interesting subplot there. One of the sisters that's on this council that is among the group encouraging her to leave. Kate Hewitt will later teach with this woman, who also will leave the Daughters of Charity community. Obviously, they were close enough friends to want to go into business together. They teach together for a while and then separately. But I've often wondered if this woman, who was a sister at the time, had noticed that Kate had met this young man who was a florist in town and come to know him fairly well, and perhaps there was, for the first time in many years, a twinkle in her eye, so to speak. And so maybe this lady's trying to do her a backhanded favor. This is pure speculation on my part. But, you start trying to connect dots. You never would put this in the book because like I said, I'm going with documentation and things that I can back up. But just for my own mind's eye, I kind of thought about that because they end up teaching together and then teach separately. And ultimately, Kate will marry this man who's the local florist who did a lot of business with the church, St. Joseph's there, where Kate is assigned to the school. So who knows? But that's the story on her. She's there. She's asked to leave. She does leave. And then she starts her own business and is very successful in running a private school there.
So how old is she about this time when she marries the florist?
Well, let's see. She's born in 36. She gets married in 74. So, 38?
38, yeah. Just about 40. So that's pretty late.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, she had plans earlier to get married, but the Confederates changed that for her.
Yeah, she's 27 when he's killed. And the thing is, it kind of begins to come to the fore in the letters written by Kate to John's sisters. And there are a number of letters that they exchange. And then the sisters will turn around and write letters to Charles Vail. And these letters are extant. They're at Franklin and Marshall, and you can read these. And they always make mention of her up until the time she leaves. And in making mention of her, they discuss this persistent cough that Kate has developed. And sometimes she's having problems with it. Sometimes she seems to be better. Then it's gotten even worse, and etc. And ultimately, this is going to not be a good thing for Kate because she struggles with it tremendously. So,
is it tuberculosis?
Yeah. I mean, that's what's on her. Jumping ahead a little bit here. Cause of death is consumption, which is tuberculosis. It's funny, Matt, you keep mentioning movie analogies. And by the way, for the record, Tombstone, I don't think there's a greater movie ever made.
I agree.
And, a lot of the guys who are in Gettysburg are in it. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Pickett is Ike Clanton.
Well, you know what's funny that you mentioned that? You mentioned Tombstone. I was reading an article in the Civil War Times last night from, it was... I don't know, in the 90s, but it was a couple years after the movie came out, and it was telling the story of how it almost never was made and then how it was eventually made. But there were a lot of people who were involved in four of my favorite movies that were involved with Gettysburg. You had the editor edited Lonesome Dove, which to me is... for me, it's tied with Tombstone as the greatest Western ever made.
100% agree. Yeah. And Robert Duvall, unbelievable.
Best performance ever in any one of his best performance. And that's even better than Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore.
Godfather.
And Great Santini. I mean, Gus McCrae is the role he was meant to play. He even said that. So he agrees with me.
He agrees. Good.
So the editor there, what's his name? Randy Edelman, the composer, did the music for Last of the Mohicans. There were some behind the scenes people who worked on Last of the Mohicans with reenactors and stuff that worked on Gettysburg. Of course, you got all the actors who were in Tombstone. Dirty Billy told me stories about how he got the job doing the hats on Tombstone because of what he did on Gettysburg, and Sam Elliott was that connection. Yeah. And he told me the story. I asked him years ago, I came in and I said, have you ever seen Tombstone? He kind of smiled and he said, oh, yeah. And I said, can you make me a hat like Doc Holliday's hat? Because I just love that hat. And he goes, that's my hat. And I said, you made that hat? And he goes, it was my hat. I wore that hat. I was wearing it the first day of shooting, and he saw it on me. And he said, do you mind if I wear that in the film? I said, no, it'd be my pleasure. And he never gave it back. And I said, well, that's interesting. I know the guy who has the hat to this day. And it's sitting in his basement in Pittsburgh.
So, are you serious?
Yeah. My friend John, he has all this memorabilia from the movie. And Tombstone, again, is one of it. It seems like if you're a fan of the movie Gettysburg, you're a fan of these other movies that we're talking about, too. And I don't know what it was about that time, but there were some really good war movies and Westerns that were made.
They were. Absolutely, and classic. I mean, Val Kilmer was Doc Holliday.
Oh, yeah.
Out in my mind, you know.
Yep.
I mean, the quotes that come out of, I mean,
it's
my kids were quoting the Gettysburg movie, you know, I have no division, right? Quoting that, but then all the quotes that come out of Tombstone, just a great, I just had a poster framed the other day. All my sons-in-law love that movie, and so they all got socks for Christmas with, you know, I'm your Huckleberry and all that. So, which means, with Matt, I'm looking for a road trip out to see your buddy. Whatever it takes, man, we'll do this. Tell him he's got an autographed book coming his way. I got to see this hat.
You know what? Next time he's coming to town, I'll tell him to bring it. And I'll let you know if I have enough notice. I'll let you know ahead of time that he's coming, and if you can get up here, because he usually will come on a weekend. So,
awesome.
Yeah, if you can make it up,
I'll do it. I will do it.
Yeah, it's. I've seen pictures of it, and it's there. Like, he'll put a picture up of his kid wearing it. I'm like, what are you doing? No. Don't let their slimy saliva hands all over it. You know?
Right. They're white clothes.
But no, he's got some really cool stuff. And like the actors from the movie that we interviewed, not all of them, but a good handful of them were because of him. Like, he put me in touch with them. So he's,
really?
he stalks them. He's
yeah,
and then they're all like, okay, I better give this guy whatever he's asking for so that he doesn't, you know, show up at my house and kill me one day.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's funny, Matt, what gets you started on stuff. And people ask me always, like, how'd you get interested in Civil War and history in general? And my mom was a fourth grade teacher in the state of Maryland. And most states, I understand, fourth grade, you learn state history. Mm-hmm. And I was the youngest kid. I was the last one home, and she's going around the historic properties during the summer to bone up on all this stuff. So I'm with her, you know, and man, it rubbed off. So I got my love of history from my mom. Great teacher in college, Dr. Jim Terry. I mentioned him in my announcements. Made all the difference in the world in my life in general, but especially with my love of history. But the first time I came to Gettysburg was, as much as anything, because of a movie. Yeah. You're going to laugh. Actually, you got to tip your hat to John Jakes. He does a pretty good job. North and South.
North and South, yeah.
So, yeah, you got Swayze and James Reed playing his officer. So I'm actually in contact with one of the actors from the movie, because I wrote to him thanking him for all they did with that film, because it was part of the inspiration to bring me to Gettysburg, which was life-changing for me. So,
yeah, that's
really
funny.
Cool. We
have a guy, I don't know if you listen to the show or not, but we have a guy who comes on the show a lot named Cam. Cameron is his name. And Cam is from West Virginia, and he is the most genuine, innocent, and in many ways naive guy that you'll ever meet in your life. Like, he doesn't even say shit. You know, he'll say S. He'll be like, holy S, you know. He's just a real sweet guy. He's 30 years old, and Bo Brinkman, who played Major Taylor, is a friend of mine, and so he spends about half the year in town here, and then the other half down in Texas. And when he's up, you know, we'll go out and everything, and I'll invite Cam along once in a while if he's around. And the first time he met Bo, you know, we're all laughing and having fun and everything. And then he had a moment of seriousness. He took him aside and he said, I just want to thank you for making that movie, because if it wasn't for that movie, I would have never got into this stuff. And Bo's like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm like, yeah, of course, no problem. It's a job for you. Like, it's not.
Right.
And that's the funny thing is, like, to the actors, it's a job. They had a great time doing it. You know, there's truth to that. Like, they really did have a good time, and it was a special moment for them, because I've talked to these guys and they still think about it and they still want to come back, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it's not like a religious thing for them, like it is for the people who viewed that movie and got into it. And so it's just, you've reminded me of that story with Cam, that you actually thank the guy for making the movie, and it's that's interesting, because I've never thought to do that, but now you're the second person I know that's done that. So what was his response?
Yeah, it was actually one of the lead role females, and they were very kind.
What was Kirstie Alley's response?
Yeah, kiss Kirstie. No, So Patrick Swayze's opposite in the movie.
Oh,
right?
my God.
Charles Hazard. Do you remember he married a girl that was supposedly Irish, and there was religious differences, and
Yeah.
he meets her dad, who was Robert Mitchum in the movie, if memory serves me correct.
Yeah.
Plays a general, and is like, can I marry your daughter, and she's Catholic and Irish. And anyway, it was that young lady. She's very, very kind, and actually hope to take their family on a tour of the battlefield here before too soon. They have the book, and maybe it'll become a screenplay one day.
Well, I hope that you will. I hope that you will take a moment during your tour and say, Matt, meet us out here so I can introduce you. Because
I'll do it.
like North and South. I remember we were talking about it on a show a couple of weeks ago. I recently watched it again. And then the time before that was during the lockdowns. I was catching up on just about everything because I had nothing but time, And I watched North and South a few months ago over the winter again, and it's like as movies go, they've made better movies. It's a made-for-TV movie. It's certainly got that,
miniseries.
and it's got that 80s soap opera feel to it and everything. But for me, it's nostalgic because I was a little kid when that came out, and I remember it was a big event, television event, And I remember watching some of it. My grandparents were watching us, and we were watching it. And I remember laying on the floor in front of the TV with my chin in both hands, And I loved it because of the war aspect of it. I didn't realize that there was a soap opera aspect of it too. I just, because it was love stories are in everything. So I just like, well, whatever,
Sure, yeah.
Get to the war. But
you're living for the battle scene.
Yeah,
Fire those cannon up. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was cool. Like it was pretty neat. But so it's a very nostalgic thing for me too. Is that movie? But Gettysburg is the one that really knocked me over the edge.
Well, the other thing is, of course, the soundtrack for Gettysburg has been used any number of ways. But that soundtrack out of North and South holds a test of time too. It's kind of almost haunting,
Yeah.
And so when you go back and watch it and everything, and then they go into the credits at the end, it's like, gosh darn. Of course, it's like music. Well, I can tell you love music too, and having been a disc jockey, music is a connection to time, right?
It is.
Place in time.
It is.
It really does something. And that soundtrack from Gettysburg, oh yeah, when I'm driving up sometimes, I'll fire that up.
Oh yeah.
It's like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready for a tour.
the soundtrack to Gettysburg or Glory.
Oh yeah.
I like to blast when I'm driving around the battlefield, especially Glory, especially early in the morning. On the rare occasion that I'm up early in the morning, enough for there to still be mist on the ground. When it's misty and all atmosphere-y, that's when it's great to play the opening song on the Glory soundtrack. It's very haunting with the Harlem Boys Choir. And that's when they made movie soundtracks to stand on their own, separate from the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly. You listen to some of John Williams, you listen to any one of his soundtracks, and you don't even need to see the movie. You can just listen to the songs and be like, wow, this is good stuff. And same with those other, Lonesome Dove has a great soundtrack.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So we're well checked, but I'll ask you one more question.
Okay.
I know you can edit, so.
Yeah, but I usually don't.
All right, that's cool.
Yeah.
Favorite scene, and I talk about this all the time with people. Glory is a great movie, and to me, there's a very powerful scene in there. My favorite scene. Do you have a favorite scene that sticks out in your mind?
In Glory?
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. The scene around the campfire when they're all singing and praying before the battle, that always gets me because it's such a. It's like you're talking to your maker before you might possibly die, and to be able to acknowledge that you might die tomorrow, and go to bed and A, be able to sleep, and then B, be able to get up and not run away and go face whatever's about to befall you. Like that is for me, that's very powerful. And yet they're finding joy in communing with the creator, you know, and that music it's not depressing music that they're singing. That's music of praise and high spirits and everything. And that always moved me, that scene. My friends and I used to get drunk and do that around campfires, by the way. We didn't do it as well. Nobody could get the praying part pretty good, but we got the oh my Lord part, you know, pretty good. And the clapping.
You weren't going into battle the next day.
No,
formal battle.
No, we weren't. But I love that scene. But I also I love the last scene, the assault on Fort Wagner, like that. It's as soon as they start going and the shells start going off and they're running further into it, and I mean, it's just that kills me the most. But oh God, I don't know. There's so many in that movie that I just love. The one when they what's the name of that little village that they burn, and Shaw doesn't want to accept the order.
Yeah,
is it Darien?
Yeah, I forget. I think that's it. Yeah.
Darien. That also gets me because when he looks at Morgan Freeman, and he like, you could tell, like, to me, that's a look of, I don't want to order my boys to do this because they're good men, and good men don't do this, but I have to follow an order. And Morgan Freeman's looking at him like, we really got to do this, and then, but he's like, it's like they understand each other with just some looks. So that's another one that always gets me. I don't know, like basically every one of them moves me in some way or another. How about you? What are you getting at?
Yeah. So, and part of this stems from having been a fan of one of the best cop shows ever was Homicide: Life on the Street, filmed in Baltimore. And you're familiar with the actor Andre Braga?
Yeah.
Right? So he played the soldier in Glory, who was the one from, I guess it was Massachusetts, Boston, right? Had been a house servant. He
was Thomas, right?
Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah,
Thomas. Yeah, exactly. And there's that scene on the beach, and I'm going with the pregnant pause before the attack, right? There's that scene on the beach when Shaw's talking to him, and he basically says, you know, I got the flag, but if I go down, which one of you guys is going to carry this flag, you know?
Right.
And you're expecting anybody else but him, and he steps forward, man. I get chills thinking about it. He's like, I will, sir, you know? And I was like, oh, man, that speaks volumes right there. That's just so awesome.
That was a great character arc for him, that moment there. Like, that's where it all comes together.
Yes.
But, you know, now you said that Shaw says, if I fall, but that's what really happened. Like the movie depicts it as someone else is carrying the colors, and Shaw says, if this man should fall, and then Thomas stands forward. In reality, I think it was General Strong who said to the men, pointing to Shaw. No, wait, am I getting this wrong?
Yeah, it's been years since I've seen it, so you probably remember.
No. Yeah, no. He doesn't point to Shaw. He points to the man carrying the colors. He says, if this man should fall, who will pick up the colors? And Shaw is the one who actually stepped forward. That's what it was. Shaw is the one who stepped forward in real life. And he said, I will.
Oh, wow.
But they changed it for the movie, which I think is powerful. I think it would have been powerful either way. For a white colonel to offer to carry the standard of a black regiment into battle if the color bearer goes down, that tells me I'm with these boys. Like, these guys are my guys, and I'm with them. And then, you know, the part that always gets me, though, is the end when they're burying them, and then there's the title card that basically says that, you know, when Shaw's parents found out that he was buried with his men, they thought that was the most fitting place to put him.
Yeah,
and it was meant as an insult, but they were proud of that.
Sure.
And that to me that's the best part.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And that film's right up there, you know. That's right up there with all those we talked about. Absolutely.
Fantastic film. Not totally perfect with the history, but who cares? It's just such a good, in essence, it's right. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, listen, I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that this conversation about movies encourages you to get Jeffrey Harding's book, Gettysburg's Lost Love Story, the ill-fated romance of General John Reynolds and Kate Hewitt. It really is interesting because, as we've pointed out in this interview, nobody knows any of this stuff. This is stuff that Jeffrey and, I'm sorry, what was your research partner's name?
Yeah, that's Mary Pitkin.
They unearthed themselves. So this is basically all new information in here, and it's fascinating. Like it tells a more complete story than we've ever heard before, and I highly recommend that you get this book. Where can they get it? Amazon? Where else?
Yeah, so you can go to Arcadia Publishing, get it straight from them. You can get it at Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Or if you're in Gettysburg, a number of the local shops have it. It's over at the Foundation/Park Service bookstore there.
Is it at For the Historian?
It is at For the Historian. It absolutely is.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know that you mentioned Addressing Gettysburg at For the Historian, and you get 20% off. So I would recommend you go to For the Historian and get it.
How about that?
There you go.
I'm very proud. It's surreal to see that it's sitting in the storefront.
Yeah.
But I get around and sign some, so if somebody wants a signed copy, we can usually find a way to make that happen.
We should definitely be proud because this is a good achievement, and you're now like you've got a book that is entered into the historical record. Or the historiography, I guess I should say, that I guarantee you this is going to make it onto the licensed battlefield guide list, because this is a story that guides tell, right? And now there's more information. So, and it's well written. Yeah. It's a lot of pictures, as you point out. And, I always like pictures because I'm a visual person.
Yeah, me too, man.
Kate was pretty.
Well, it's humbling, Yeah, Kate. Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And young pictures, sketching, and you can see the beauty in that picture. It's on the cover. And as like I said, my work stands on the shoulders of so many that come before. I'm humbled. And you know what? I did all I could do to make the record as accurate as it can be right now. But there'll be more, hopefully, coming. And I'm great with that. That's history, right?
Yep.
Down the line, more stuff's digitized, something else turns up, and we'll build on it.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully there's a foundation there. And I owe a lot to people like Wayne Motz, who really backed me. And, I mean, he was fascinated by this. And you probably saw in the forward where Colonel Sheets had wanted him to find this out. And so Wayne had an avid interest. But like I mentioned, Sue, and over at the park, Greg Goodell getting the picture of the hat and the saddle in the book. And Diana Lasky, her, she does the Gettysburg Experience. Sure. She will work closely with me on it. God, John Heiser, so many people.
I know, there's a lot of good names in here.
Well, I mean, I just mention them because nothing like this happens alone. It's a humbling experience when you do something like this and you realize how much you don't know and how much you need other people to say. And this was a COVID book, so I can't go run into Franklin and Marshall. I'm relying on Christopher Robb. I can't go down to Dollars to Charity Archives, and there's this guy down there, Scott Kiefer, is so helpful, and just amazing people that made it all possible. And then on the other end of it, folks like yourself, Matt, I really appreciate you giving me this chance to talk about the book with you today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love to shine a light on people that do interesting things, and especially if it's going to help the audience have a more complete picture of the Battle of Gettysburg and everything related to it. Everybody go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, man. I didn't cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say that everybody that listens knows that, me and Jim Hassler are big Custer fans. And I had forgotten this, but I'm just thumbing through the book right now, and there's a picture of Custer, and it says, Cadet George Armstrong Custer graduated last in his class and was under arrest per orders from Commandant Reynolds at the time of his graduation.
Absolutely.
So
How about
there's
that?
even a little Custer tie-in here for all you Custer fans out there.
Jeffrey, one other one. I'm glad you brought it up. Let me sneak this in.
Go ahead.
Because, a lot of people think the book may be just about Kate. And I talk about it in the beginning. I talk about how there's, information on Reynolds was like a fire hose, and a lot of it's been published over the years. Yeah. Mike Riley's book, and Mike was a tremendous help to me as well. But anyway, Nichols is still a definitive biography and what have you. But information on Kate was like, dripping from a faucet. Had to really try to draw it out. But anyways, there's information here on Reynolds that I think that people that have an interest in this story are going to benefit from. And one of the biggest things is, and this really doesn't get drawn out, I don't think anywhere else, John Reynolds was lucky to be alive on July 1st, 1863. If you go back through the way I unfold his story, you'll see any number of times that he nearly meets his maker, whether it's in the war with Mexico, whether it's in peacetime. In two particular cases, he could have gone to Davy Jones' locker. One is covered pretty well in the Nichols book, where he's going into the Columbia River across the bar there, and that's known as a graveyard out there. I mean, a lot of ships have succumbed to the seas there, and he's on one that does and nearly goes down with it. But he just misses Matt. And I know you didn't get a chance to read it all, but go back and read about the SS San Francisco in this book. Okay. They're moving 3rd Artillery guys out to the West Coast from New York, and they're going to move a big group of his men, 500, and he would have been with them had he not been on leave, on this brand new pride of the fleet SS San Francisco. And this is around Christmas time. And this thing begins to head out and hits heavy seas off the coast of Delaware and ultimately will sink. But it is so damaged. Deck house is blown off. Many guys drown. They get cholera. The whole thing's a mess.
Geez.
And he's just lucky not to be on that. And then in the Civil War, there's a couple of instances down in Beaver Dam Creek, Mechanicsville, whatever you want to say, comes close, and certainly Second Manassas. He's exposing himself on the front lines. I mean, grabbing the flag, right, racing up and down on horseback. This guy could have been killed any number of times, and the fact that he's alive is really a miracle. So I think that that's something that no one's really ever looked at, and the reason you made me think of it is I equate it to what did Custer used to say about himself?
Custer's luck.
Evading. Yeah, and I equated it to that. I said, this is what you would have to dub Reynolds' luck.
Yeah. There you go.
Until Gettysburg.
There you go. Yeah. All right. So. Well, we'll leave it at that then. That's a good way to end it.
All right, man. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it very much. Pleasure.
Yes, sir. And thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. All right. Thanks, Jeff. That was great.